Hey there, folks. Welcome to Module 1 of the Microsoft MD-101 course. Today's module is titled Explore Modern Management, and it goes without saying that every module going forward will have its own little cool name that Microsoft has allocated to it. Now, for Module 1 and Module 1 only, I'll just mention the course name again. That is Managing Modern Desktops. I'm not going to mention that again in the other modules because it's going to stay the same. It's just the modules' names themselves that'll go and change. Now, as for the agenda, guys, I want to make it clear that what we're about to list here is simply the main sections in this specific module, and it's in no way the reflection of the actual topics that's going to be covered in this specific module. If you would like a better idea of what topics are being covered in this specific module, that you can find in the video description down below with a nice little timestamp next to each topic for those guys who would like to go and skip ahead to certain topics because you're revising on them, or you would just like to go and check certain topics out in general. Either way, timestamps next to each topic for your convenience, guys. Now, as for the agenda on this module, first up, we're going to be covering the section called Examine the Enterprise Desktop. The second main section we'll be jumping into is Explore Azure Active Directory. And then the third and the last section in this specific module will be Manage Identities in Azure Active Directory. Well, there you guys have it. Those are the three main sections in Module 1 for this course. Now, before we go ahead and jump into the first section here, just a little bit of a selfless promotion. If you guys haven't done it already, please give the video a like. It really does boost my video. More people can see it then. You help the channel, you help the video, you help other people see this video. And if you obviously would like to know when the next module, being Module 2, comes out, or any of my other lessons, remember to subscribe, otherwise you might miss it. Now that we've got my selfless promo out of the way, let's get into the first main section here, guys. That will be Examine the Enterprise Desktop. Now, within this section, the first thing we're going to be talking about is benefits of modern management. So here on the left, I've got traditional methods, in other words, old school. So if we look at traditional methods, they take a significant amount of effort and are very time consuming. This applies to pretty much anything. I mean, if you go look at something simple like installing the Windows operating system onto a machine, how do we used to do that? Normally that involved taking out a CD or a DVD, putting that into the optical drive, booting from the optical drive, manually doing everything, and it will take forever and a day. You could literally go and start the process, go and make dinner and come back, and if you're lucky, it might be done. Very time consuming, very annoying, and very a lot of other things. So yeah, not so nice. Luckily these days we don't really have to struggle with that, but we'll get to that. Now, if you look at these traditional methods from back in the day and all that, it was very difficult to support multiple form factors and scenarios like BYOD. BYOD standing for Bring Your Own Device. So these form factors they're referring to in the Microsoft course is if you would like to go and manage devices like phones, tablets, something out of the ordinary. If you go back 5, 10 years, maybe even more than 10 years, the average person used to use only a desktop PC, only laptops, and normally only the people who were like in management position would have a laptop. In some rare cases, maybe a salesperson or someone that's out on the go that had to go and consult and do whatever. Those folks would have laptops. But people with laptops were normally the top dogs. The average person would have to drive into the office, go and sit at a desktop PC and work there every day. Nowadays, times have changed. People don't just use desktops or laptops, they use their phones and tablets. A lot of people don't even come into the office, and I'm not even referring to the pandemic. The pandemic definitely did put stuff on the fast track, but if you think about it, we were heading in that direction anyway. People were already starting to work from home even way before the pandemic. It's just the pandemic just kind of put it on the fast track, getting us to the end result a lot quicker. So if so many people working from home and just working remotely in general because they're seeing clients and going for meetings and stuff, it becomes somewhat difficult for us as IT engineers and technicians and stuff to manage those people, to manage those devices, to give them support and to give them what they need. It becomes a bit of a problem now, doesn't it? Now here on the right, we've got pillars of modern management. So this basically refers to where we are now more or less and what we're doing now more or less versus what we used to go and do. So these days, unlike in the old days, things are easier to deploy and easier to manage. It doesn't matter where someone is or something is, you or I can go and manage them or their devices. We can deploy stuff to them. This could be operating systems, can be softwares, can be updates, can be firmwares, can be drivers, you name it, we can go and do this. Many ways you can achieve this. Now, this course is somewhat limited to Microsoft examples, unfortunately. So just to spitball and give you an idea, one of the ways I would go about doing it would be to go and use Microsoft Intune, which is a nice cloud platform, great for managing devices. It's not necessarily in your office. So if you've got folks that's on the go and using devices all over the place, Intune is the way to go. If you've got folks working physically on premises, then something like SCCM might be better. That's a suite of tools. Now, a lot of these tools that I'm going to be mentioning to you guys, including the ones I've just mentioned, can be combined with one another. You can tie them into one another. It just so happens that you can actually go and tie Intune into SCCM, and that'll be one mean machine that you can go and use to manage people, either off-site or on-site. It doesn't matter. Now, if you look at the pillars of modern management, things these days are always up to date, especially if you look at the fact that so much of our stuff is in the cloud. So if you look at the cloud, something like Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure, all of that kind of stuff, your stuff is effectively stored somewhere else, it's running somewhere else, and that entity, which is in this case Microsoft, is just rendering those services back to you for a fee, which is usually a monthly fee. So the fact that they're managing it means it's always going to be up to date, and it's for the most part going to be their problem. Wow, it kind of sounds like I'm explaining cloud now, doesn't it? Also, when it comes to the pillars of modern management, you'll find we've got intelligent security. All of this is built in these days. In the old days, it was a real painstaking process because everything was your problem. Everything was your responsibility. It was your responsibility to make sure you've got spam filters on site. It was your responsibility to make sure that updates have been taken place, for system, especially security, since this is all about security right now. It was your responsibility to make sure you've got antiviruses installed. It was your responsibility to make sure each and every user has it installed, that they're in fact updating it. It was your responsibility to make sure a firewall's in place, software or physical, preferably physical, and that it's configured correctly. Everything was your problem and your responsibility. So that's where we're coming from. These days, so much of this has fallen away. It's not necessarily your problem or your responsibility. If you look at something like Microsoft's cloud platforms, if you were to go and drop something on Azure, it's not necessarily your problem depending on what type of cloud you use. Yep, I just said what type of cloud. You in fact get many kinds of cloud. You get private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, and within each of these you get subcategories. For example, in public cloud, you get things like software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. So the amount of cloud types you get is insane, folks. But they all give you a decent amount of security, which means it's not your problem. These days, modern management also gives us proactive insights. There is so freaking many monitoring tools, guys. You're going to get sick of it. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm not even necessarily referring to this course, just in general. With just Microsoft alone, the amount of monitoring tools you get these days is insane. It's enough to get sick of. I know, I don't want to discourage you guys, but really it is. You're going to find, just with 365 alone, there's so freaking many monitoring tools, and in a lot of ways, they actually tend to overlap somewhat. So if they do overlap, some of them are almost nearly identical, it's going to come down to preference. Which one do you prefer to go and use? So maybe one person prefers to drive a Mercedes-Benz, the next person prefers to drive BMW, but at the end of the day, they do the same thing. It's going to come down to personal preference. So yeah, there is no way that you or your company will be blind ever again. It's going to just come down to, do you have these tools at your disposal? And that normally comes down to, do you have the right subscription plan? So if we're talking about something like Microsoft 365, the more you pay, the better the license, the more goodies you get. So it's like most things in life. You get what you pay for, I suppose. All right, so let's take a bit of a look at enterprise desktop life cycle model. So here we just want to give you guys a bit of a quick overview of how it works when you're about to go deploy a desktop, a laptop, or some sort of software. So I think this one is more about desktops themselves, desktops, laptops, and stuff that you're going to go and give to your users to go and use for an X amount of time. But the picture I've got here for you guys, there it is. This also somewhat relates to software, believe it or not. So first of all, way on the left, way at the top, we're going to plan. So this is the seed where it's just an idea in someone's head. We have no idea what we're going to do yet. So we're going to sit down with the stakeholders. These would be the folks that's got any interest in the success or failure of this project. So fellow technicians, managers, and the people that's actually going to be using this. And we're going to discuss what do we need, how are we going to go about it. So when it comes to deploying desktops, we might go and discuss, okay, boys and girls, what do we want to give a new user that just starts at this company? We obviously want to give them a desktop or a laptop. That's a given. What do we want on that desktop or laptop? We need an operating system. Cool. Which one do we need? You might think, okay, cool, let's just give them an operating system. No, it's not that simple. You need to go look at the requirements. Now, you could go and argue and say, let's just get them the most expensive operating system, but that adds up. If you've got a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand people, and you just go and willy-nilly buy the most expensive operating system edition when you did not need to, that little bit and little bit and little bit, it adds up, people. So you don't want to give people more than what they need. So if they need a cheaper edition, and a cheaper edition of Windows would get the job done, that is ideally what you want to give them. So you're first going to go and discuss what operating system is the cheapest one that meets your minimum requirements. Once you've got that out of the way, what software does your people or your users need? So once you've discussed what software or whatever your people need, then you will go and deploy. So this is normally going to be formed into an image of sorts, if you folks know what an image is. So we're probably going to go and make one desktop where we're going to go and build it. We're going to go and install Windows. We're going to go and install all the softwares and everything the average Joe would need or what they have in common. And once we've got that set up, we're going to go and create what is known as an image. It's like a snapshot. So we're going to go and store that image, digitally speaking, somewhere, like on a server. And the next time, whenever we've got a new employee that needs to get hired and he or she needs a new machine, you simply take that machine, you provision it to that image that was stored on the server, and instead of it taking you a whole day or a couple of hours or so to set it up, you can get this set up in as little as 5 minutes sometimes. Really that easy, folks. And you can use that exact same image on multiple PCs at the same time. There's been many times where I went to my clients where I would sometimes deploy the exact same image to a couple of hundred machines at the same time. And this would all get done in about 10 to 15 minutes. So I could easily get 100 machines provisioned in as little as 10 to 15 minutes. Yes, really. So now once you've got an idea as to what you want to include in all of this, then it's about purchasing. So then you're going to go purchase those Windows licenses, you're going to go purchase the softwares if anything needs to be purchased, and then you're going to go and start deploying it to the folks that actually need it. This could be a situation of everybody needs this in the company, or it could be a situation if you're only going to deploy it from this point forward to the people that actually need it. So in other words, new people in your company, new employees. There's going to be a phase where on the right, which you can see is operating phase. So that's where the user is actually going to go use this for an X amount of time. What that time frame is, I cannot tell you guys because every company and every situation is obviously unique. So you're going to go and you're going to have to make that call. This could be just a month. It could be a year. Heck, this could be 5 or 10 years for all we know. Now, eventually, as the user starts using this machine and all that, there's going to be time frames where you're going to have to support the user, give them new softwares, remove the old one, fix this, fix that. That's where you come in. So that's you at the bottom right there. There's going to be a time when you will need to upgrade this machine. So we're going to normally try and stretch it out as long as possible to make our investment last as long as possible. So all of that money we basically invested in this in step 2, we want to make it last for us. We want to make it work for us. So there's going to be a time where you might be required to go and upgrade the hardware. Maybe the whole physical desktop or laptop might need to be upgraded. It could just be a small upgrade. Maybe you just need to give it more storage, more memory. We don't know. It could be a software upgrade. We don't know. Heck, this could be a situation where you might need to upgrade both the hardware and the software. And then eventually there's going to be a tipping point where you will retire the software or the hardware or all of the above. When that time is, I don't know. You will have to make the decision based on what it is we're talking about here. All right, so since we've just talked about that, let's talk about planning and purchasing. So there is going to be some similarities between this and what we just said. First of all, we're going to be discussing the planning stage, which includes computer strategy. What kind of computers do you want users to use? Will this be laptops, desktops, tablets, phones? Where are these people going to be working from? So Once you decided how you want your people to work, I mean, we've just mentioned earlier that people don't necessarily work from the office. So if your users are going to be working from home, or if they're going to be on the go a lot, you might need to take that into consideration. So giving them a desktop PC will be ill-advised. You would have to give them something practical, which is easy to pick up, easy to go, something that's very mobile. So the first step is the computer strategy. What do we need? Why do we need it? Once you've decided that, then it's about computer selection, which is 10 to 1 going to come down to something like a laptop. So I've chosen, let's say, a laptop. I've chosen a specific make and a specific model because it meets my unique requirements of mobility. And I've checked what my specific users needs RAM-wise, storage-wise, all of that. And based on that criteria, I made a decision to choose a specific make and model of a laptop. Now it comes down to deployment methods. So depending on where your people are, you will have to make a decision on how you will be giving them what they need. So if these folks already have a computer, but let's say they're not at the office, how do you give them what they need? Or if they have a computer but they are in the office, how do you give them what they need? So depending on what device they have, depending on where they are, and depending on what they currently have on that device, and depending on whether this device belongs to the company or if it belongs to the user, those are factors that's going to have an influence on your deployment method. So if the users are at the company, chances are this device probably belongs to the company. So it's probably not a BYOD situation. And it's probably the easiest to go and do deployment if the user or the device is at the company, which is considered on premises. You can go and use your normal MDT. You can go and use Microsoft Intune, even if they are on premises. You can go and use SCCM. There's a lot of other Microsoft solutions and tools you can go make use of. But what about if people are not at the office? So to get around that, you can go make use of things like Microsoft Intune, which is a cloud tool, so it doesn't matter where these people are. You can go make use of Microsoft Store for Business to give them some of the applications and stuff they need. You can go tie SCCM into Intune to give them what they need, but that still requires you to have Intune. You can go and make use of Windows Autopilot, if you know what that is. So it allows you to provision machines even though you might never have seen them or touched them. Yep, pretty cool like that. So yeah, guys, there's a lot of things you can go make use of. It all comes down to some of those things I just mentioned to you guys. Then we've got demand forecasting. So what I want to mention here is you should always plan for growth and the unexpected. So if you currently have 100 people or 1,000 people in your company, let's say it's 1,000, you should probably go and plan for 1,001, 1,005, or 2,000 because no company stays the same. They will grow. The softwares people are going to be using, they're going to become more and more and more and more sophisticated. The bandwidth your people use, that is going to have to be more and more because they're going to have more and more softwares and stuff that's going to be pulling bandwidth. So you're going to have to basically kick it up a notch there with the bandwidth because of that. But not just because of that. Also because people have more and more faster needs. So where a 50 meg line might be sufficient now, and a month from now, even if the same amount of people, the same amount of applications, 50 meg might no longer be sufficient as time goes on and as technology obviously develops. So all of these are things you need to go and plan for. Where is your company going to? Will there be more staff hired? Will there be a need possibly in the near foreseeable future to go and increase bandwidth because of more software, more users? Will there be a need to go and increase speed possibly in the future because of what the people will be doing, what you guys will be switching to? All of these are factors you need to take into consideration. Design configuration. That I cannot tell you guys what you're going to do. You need to physically be at the side of the client or at the side of your own premises to be able to decide what design you want to go and use for your software, for your hardware, for your network, how you want what and where you want what. There's going to be a very good reason for that. So in my case, just to thumb suck a little bit, if I have a pretty decently sized company, I probably would make first of all sure that I've got fault tolerance, redundancy, and high availability. I would make sure I've got 2 internet connections with 2 different providers in case the one goes down, because let's face it, there's no company these days that does not and cannot rely on internet. They need internet at all times, these companies. It's a must. You need to make sure you've got a backup power source. You need to make sure you've got 2 or more of pretty much everything. What are we talking firewall here? What are we talking service here? 2 or more of everything. You double up on everything. Now, this sounds great and easy on paper. It sounds like sunshine and rainbows, but let me tell you, it's not always that easy. It's going to come down to, does your users, your staff have the skills to go and pull this off? It's going to come down to your budget. Does the budget allow it? Because it's definitely not going to be cheap, guys. So that is a little bit about the planning stage and what it includes. Here we've got the purchasing stage, which includes buying some of the following. So this includes hardware, such as desktops, laptops, and other devices. This could be access points, could be routers, firewalls, tablets, phones, and the list goes on. You can use your imagination. Other things you might need to go and buy is software, including operating systems and applications. It could be deployment support that you might need to go and buy, such as storage, flash drives. Heck, this could even be your traditional good old-fashioned blank DVDs if you still do stuff old school, although I find the last one unlikely. Other stuff you might need to go and buy is accessories such as monitors and docking stations. Now, the docking stations is kind of being phased out. I'm only mentioning that because it's part of the course. It's the only reason I'm mentioning it, because you never know of Microsoft what they might ask in the exam. But realistically, I can tell you people don't really use docking stations anymore. We only use that for phones. I wouldn't say they're extinct, but they're nearly extinct. You hardly ever see anyone using those these days. Anyway, let's talk a bit about desktop deployment. So we did mention this a couple of times earlier, and a couple of methods about how you can go about doing this. So the first thing we want to go and do normally is configuring standardized baseline operating systems, computers, and network access. So this refers back to what we said more or less earlier regarding images and all that. So if we are going to be giving a new staff member, for example, a new machine, he or she will need that machine to be provisioned. It's going to be silly to give them a blank machine. So we could go and install Windows onto the machine for them prior to giving it to them, but they will still need the softwares, a whole bunch of settings. They will need this, they will need that. So they're going to be in your office the whole day for a couple of days. It's just a huge inconvenience you want to try best avoid. So to avoid that, that's where the image comes into play. So before you give your average user their new desktop machine or laptop or whatever you're going to be using, you will provision that machine with one of the images you've got on server that's got all the right operating system. It's got the right operating system on it. It's got the right drivers on it. It's got the right updates on it. It's got the right software settings, all of that, or at least most of it, which makes your work minimal in the day. Now, this image normally has certain settings pre-configured, like network access and all of that. So the only thing you need to still do with regards to network access is just to make sure the person is plugged into the internet connection, in the form of a network cable, or that they're on the office Wi-Fi connection if they want to go and use wireless. If they're at home, that's maybe your responsibility to provide them with internet access at home, if that's your company policy. Alternatively, they need to go and hook that up themselves. Now, what we also have with regards to desktop deployment is deployment in phases to validate configurations and scenarios prior to broad deployment. So nobody goes and just overnight deploys something big to the whole company, whether this be an operating system or a new program or a setting or whatever. That is a bad idea, guys. It's a very slippery slope. And if something, God forbid, doesn't work, it's going to be a huge train smash. So normally what we suggest you go and do is, you'll find the average company will go and do what we call a pilot program. So whatever this might be, you're going to go and deploy this to a bunch of guinea pigs, if you want to go and call it that. Microsoft calls them pilot users. Fancy, fancy. I just call them guinea pigs because that's what they are. It's a bunch of testers. So you grab 5, 10, 20 people in the company, you deploy whatever this is to them, whether it be an operating system, software, whatever, deploy it to them, see how they behave, and see if the software, the operating system is working the way you intend. If that goes according to plan, everything goes smoothly, and you're happy with the results, then you'll go ahead and deploy it to the actual production environment. In other words, the rest of the company. Now, what we also have here with regards to desktop deployment is considerations for enrolling devices. So this refers more to things like your Microsoft Intune, which we spoke of earlier. It's not limited to that, guys. So if you would like to manage your devices, but these devices are maybe on premises, this would require you to maybe you make use of something like ACCM. So this is mostly a tool that's used for on-premises. Provided your devices are on-premises, you can do pretty much anything you can imagine with SCCM. But that also once again sounds like hacking, because it sounds like I'm just going to be taking control. So to prevent this from being such, an agent file normally needs to be dropped/installed onto these machines you're going to be managing with SCCM, just like you would need to go and pre-enroll these devices into the Intune environment if you would like to go and manage them with Intune. Now lastly, with regards to desktop deployment, we also have successful data migration is critical. That's only applicable if there is data to go and migrate. So if you are going to be giving this to someone that's brand spanking new, it's a new employee you've just hired, chances are this person is going to be getting a blank machine. They're just going to get the normal softwares and stuff they need, but documents wise, there's not much really going on, because what documents are you going to be migrating? This person just started working for the company. But if the person has gotten themselves a new desktop or laptop, maybe it's time for an upgrade, and you wish to go and move the stuff over from the old device to the new device, migration, being successful is key here. So it's very advisable to make sure you always do a backup. You'll see Microsoft doesn't always mention you should go and do a backup. They say, yeah, this stuff will always work. It's always successful. They've never had any issues. I'll tell you otherwise. I can't say I've had issues where migration doesn't work, but I've heard rumors, so it's always a good thing to go and make a backup. I mean, you can't go wrong with a backup. It might take you slightly longer, but at least you know you're covered when stuff goes sideways. You make a backup. Heck, if need be, make another backup. You can never have too many backups, because if stuff goes sideways, you're covered. Anyway, let's move on to the next section within this main section. So this is not the next main section, it's just another topic. Plan and application deployment. So we were mostly talking about deployment, but more from a desktop perspective. So this is more from the applications perspective, although there's a lot of similarities, quite frankly. So first of all, application inventory and compatibility. So what that means is I would like to know what applications my users currently have on their devices. Notice I said devices and I did not say computers, because this is not limited to laptops and desktops. These people are also using phones and tablets. So if I need to go and deploy something to my users, I need to know, are they already running something else which is similar? Maybe they already have the application I'm running. Maybe it's a different version, newer or older. There's also the factor you need to keep in mind of hardware compatibility. Maybe what I'm about to go and deploy to these devices is not compatible. This could be for multiple reasons. It could be because of the operating system they're running. Maybe that operating system does not support what I'm about to go and deploy. Maybe the hardware is not sufficient. Maybe this device does not have enough storage. Maybe this device does not have enough RAM, in other words, system memory. That's a problem. So before we go ahead and just willy-nilly deploy applications, it's a good idea to think about desktop analytics. How you get this is up to you. There's like a million ways to get this done. One of the ways to get that done is, ironically, the Microsoft Intune we've been talking about. You guys will notice there's a lot about Intune in this course. MD-101 hammers on Intune. The exam will hammer you on Intune. There's a lot about Intune. And if you guys were to have gone and done this course officially with an official Microsoft training provider, you would have basically gotten the same training theory-wise, but there's also labs normally involved in the course, and those labs would basically have you guys do practically what I'm explaining theoretically here. If you guys do have access to some sort of lab environment, I definitely encourage you guys to go and use that. It really is good at reinforcing the knowledge that I'm teaching you guys here. But if you don't stress about it. It's not the end of the world. At the end of the day, this is a theory exam. It's not a practical exam. You will not be required to go and do this stuff practically in the exam. You will just be required to answer the theory questions in the exam. So the theory questions will, for the most part, be monkey puzzle, multiple choice. So they will ask you a question, and normally you will have to go and choose, in most cases at least, you'll have to go and choose one answer out of 4 possible answers. There's a few cases where you'll get other kinds of questions, but for the most part, it's what I just said. Now, getting back to desktop analytics, I mentioned Intune is one of the main tools we use for that, and that's what they actually have in mind when we discuss this topic. So I'm going to go and use Intune in this case, and I'm going to be able to pull all kinds of data and information about my devices. I can see what devices they are, where they are, can see what operating system they're running, what build they're running, what edition they're running. I can see the hardware specs of these devices, how much storage they've got left, how much memory they have, all that kinds of stuff, which is great when it comes to me doing my planning before I am going to go and deploy this to my users. Something else you guys need to keep in mind is application packaging. How do you want to go and give it to your people? Do you plan on just as is giving it to your people, via Intune? Would you like to go and deploy this perhaps via some sort of other method like the Windows Store for Business? You can actually go and deploy it via that if you would like. There's other methods as well. I mean, you can possibly go and make use of SCCM if you know what you're doing. So yeah, how would you like to go and package this? Do you want to include something else? How do you want to go and deploy this? We also have application lifecycle support. So that would include things like Microsoft Store for Business, which we've mentioned already. It includes Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Now, believe it or not, the Microsoft Endpoint Manager Microsoft refers to here is, in fact, the old ACCM. So Endpoint Manager is the old configuration manager that you would have gotten in ACCM. So ACCM, in case you guys haven't heard me say it already, stands for System Central Configuration Manager. It's a suite of tools, consists of about 6 or 7 very, very powerful tools, neato tools, and one of those tools is Configuration Manager, which we now call Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Now, the name kind of tells you what you need to know. It's an endpoint manager. So these computers and laptops and stuff that you go and manage, those are endpoints, guys. Anyway, we also have virtualization solutions you guys can go make use of. So, instead of trying to make some sort of plan on deploying these applications via mythical ways to my people and their devices, why not have them access these applications virtually? That is an option you can go and consider. This virtual option could be, but it's not limited to cloud. So you could possibly go make use of software as a service, which is one form of public cloud. This essentially means the software is installed on Microsoft's platform. It's running on their platform. It's taking storage on their platform. Everything is happening on Microsoft's platform. And you or the user will simply be accessing this over the internet via something like a browser, for example. So that means you just need an internet and you need a screen. But what the specs of your device is doesn't matter. You can have a PC that's 20 years old. It can barely run. It doesn't matter because this is all running somewhere else. It's simply just displaying onto the user's machine. I mean, heck, this could be other forms of technology. It could just be normal virtual technology like app virtualization, application virtualization. This is better known as app-v for short. App-v, in other words. So you could go and make use of application virtualization. You can go make use of remote desktop. Now, you might wonder, what do I mean by making use of remote desktop? I've had many clients where they would get a very beefed up server and everybody in this company, in other words, all staff members, would remote desktop into the same server at the same time. And this would normally be done using their Active Directory usernames and passwords. So that means they can get themselves thin client machines, which in other words, in a nutshell, means it's cheap computers. They cost minimal. It literally just needs to be able to run Windows, and it needs to be able to go on remote desktop. Other than that, the person is going to start the PC in the morning. They're going to open remote desktop, and as soon as they connect to the server, that's where everything is going to happen once they've logged into their account. So these are just some of the options you guys can go make use of. I'm actually mentioning extra beyond what the course requires for you guys to know. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic here. Plan for operations and support. So some of the factors to consider in the operation phase, I'm going to give you guys another phase in a moment. But with regards to the operation phase, facilities. Where are you going to be based? Where are your users going to be based? Will you have servers? And if so, are they physical? And if they are, where are they based? So facilities is becoming less and less of a problem, luckily, these days, because so much is becoming virtual and so much is especially becoming cloud, which means there's not really as much of a need for physical premises these days. And companies love that because one of the biggest expenses for a company is renting offices. And there's also a few other random things, because people love to use the office, the office coffee, the office tea, office toilet paper, which we refer to as white gold, all that kinds of stuff. There was a survey done not too long ago where they showed some of the biggest expenses for a company is just giving people coffee and tea and toilet paper, because people feel you know what, this is not my coffee, it's not my tea, it's not my toilet paper, I'll waste it. I'll use as much as I want. But when they get home, they're very conservative. They use it a lot more wisely. So if you take that all away, the office costs and all those other ones I just mentioned to you guys, you will find your operations cost is going to go down massively. Your overhead is going to go down massively. Now, what we also have when it comes to operation phase, some of the factors you can consider is computer security. How secure are these computers? And believe it or not, I'm not just talking about the software you're running on these machines, like your antivirus and firewall and all that. I'm also referring to where are these computers. If they are, for example, at home, that puts them at a greater risk compared to the office, at least in the eyes of the average company. Because how secure is your home? You've got friends and family and stuff visiting there. There's strangers there, and they could potentially see what's on the company asset or what's on your asset, which happens to have company information. That's a concern. So you'll often find that companies have a requirement that if you are working from home, this device must be BitLocker encrypted. This device must have multi-factor authentication. These are musts according to a lot of companies that if you would like to work from home. If this is normally not a requirement, it's normally because the nature of your data is not that sensitive. Computer security is also an issue, in a sense of people just on the go a lot. I mean, if this person is going to be grabbing a laptop, for example, and this person is using public transportation, or this person parks their vehicle in a very sketchy neighborhood where they could possibly break into your car and steal the laptop, all of these are concerns. So companies are not too concerned about the asset itself, although that is a bit of a pain in the neck if that asset gets stolen. But why they're not too concerned is because the asset is normally insured for most companies. It's more the information on the device that's of concern here because it might be trade secrets. It might be sensitive in nature. Other factors to consider in the operation phase is software updates. So if people are at the office, that's not the biggest deal. I mean, you just need to go and choose a software, you need to go and choose a schedule. So obviously you want to go and do this after hours and that kinds of stuff. So that's pretty straightforward. That we've been doing for the last decades. So where it becomes troublesome or tricky is when these people are not in the office or ever at the office, quite frankly. How do you give them updates? So there's multiple softwares you can go make use of that, with regards to that. And one of them, surprise, surprise, is Microsoft Intune, guys. Other factors is database protection. Now, this is assuming that there is databases you can protect. There might be none. And then we've got IT administration. The only issue I've got with IT administration, me personally, is if the device physically is broken or physically needs to be fixed. But anything other than physically being broken or physically needing being fixed, that doesn't require a user to be at the office, if you think about it. There's so many freaking softwares on the market right now that you can go make use of to go and give users what they need, to give them the assistance they need, to go and pull information that you might need, to go and deploy or migrate what you might need. I mean, Microsoft Intune is probably going to be one of the main ones in this course, which we're going to be talking about the most. So the only factor you need to be concerned about here with regards to IT administration is if this person physically needs more RAM. I mean, let's face it, how are you going to give them that? They will need to bring you that asset. They will need to bring it into the office, exchange it for a better one, a higher spec one, or they will have to leave it there for a small amount of time, a couple of minutes, an hour or so that it can be upgraded. Anyways, let's take a bit of a look at another phase here. I've got the support phase, which includes things like training. Now, the training can be more than one thing, folks. This is training your users to go and use whatever it is they need to go and use. This could be the actual device, the laptop, desktop, phone, whatever it might be. So they might need some brief training on how the buttons work, how the softwares work, that kinds of stuff. It could actually be to train them to do their job, and I don't mean that in a bad way. This is maybe a very weird, unique, tricky kind of job, and someone needs to show that person how to do whatever it is they're supposed to go and do. So just because someone is qualified in something doesn't mean they can do a certain job. You will need to show them how your respective company does certain things and what your respective company's policies and procedures and stuff is. This training could also be for other random study stuff, just for example, Microsoft Teams. Maybe your users have to start using Teams instead of Skype for Business because Skype for Business is reaching its end of life. And now these people are stuck in their ways. They don't want to go over to Microsoft Teams because it's something new. It's uncharted waters. So you are going to have to go and give them training. And as you'll see, as soon as you give these folks training, they're going to normally be a lot more comfortable of switching over to this new software, whatever it might be. In this case, it's Teams. And they're going to, obviously use it with minimal issues. So maybe, invite them all to the boardroom in the company, throw in a projector, give them a quick 10, 15, 20-minute session where you show them, guys, this is Microsoft Teams. This is what it does. This is how you guys are going to be using it. Just show them the basics of what they need to know. This training can also be your IT staff, including yourself. Maybe, just maybe, you might need to go for some sort of training, pretty much exactly what you guys are doing right now, to be able to do whatever it is you need to go and do. In this case, you're doing the MD-101 course because you would probably like to manage or know how to manage a large group of users and a large group of devices. And these devices or users are probably not going to be in the office. So that's one of the reasons why you're on this course. You're training yourself, or your company is getting you to train. Yeah, that's what training comes down to. Now, in the support phase, we also have IT support. How do you provide these users with IT support? Once again, one of the tools we can go and make use of is Intune. If they happen to be on premises, you can go and make use of SCCM's Endpoint Manager, which used to be the old Configuration Manager. Alternatively, you can go make use of third-party software, which I'm not really allowed to mention here, but let's mention a couple. I've seen a lot of technicians like to make use of things like TeamViewer, AnyDesk. I think there's one called VNC or VLC. I think it's called VNC. They all do essentially the same thing. It allows the technician to remotely control the user's machine. You can move their mouse, you can control their keyboard, you can see what they're doing, you've got full control, and that's a great way of supporting your users. The last support phase we've got here is servicing hardware. Once again, absolutely no surprise that Intune is going to be one of the main tools that we're going to be using for that. So doing what we call compliancy scans, watch out, that's going to be a question in the exam, guys. If you do compliancy scans using Intune, you can go and see if your users meet the compliance requirements of your company. So if you require people to have no less than 2 gigs of RAM, anything more is obviously a bonus, you can do a compliancy scan to check if everybody meets that requirement. If they do not, you will get an alert or a notification informing you of how many do not meet this requirement, who they are, where they are, and you can arrange for them to come in for an upgrade or for a swap of some kind. This compliance requirements could be software-wise. It could be a setting. I can go do a compliance scan to check if these people are using MFA. I can do a compliance scan to check if they're using BitLocker encryption. I can go and do a compliance scan to go and check whether they've got the right software installed, whether they've got any software installed, whether it's the right version that's installed, if there's stuff installed that should not be installed, and if so, I can have it removed automatically. It's a lot of things you can go and do when it comes to servicing. Anyway, enough of that. Let's move on to this. Plan for upgrades and retirements. And this is something all companies are facing. Some companies just more than others, depending on how much of your stuff is virtual, how much of your stuff is in the cloud. But let's face it, all companies still have physical devices to a certain degree. At the very, very least, your people will have a laptop or a desktop to go and access this stuff, which might be in the cloud. But you still need an asset. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we need to once again consider according to Microsoft. So let's start with factors to consider in the actual upgrade phase. So the first one is the facilities. This can be a lot of things. It could be things like your server room. Does your server room have enough room that if you would like to go and upgrade the servers that you can actually go and house them there? That could be that. It could be, do you have facilities if you would like to go and hire more staff? That's basically an upgrade, although I don't think that's what we're referring to here. Do you have enough space in your server racks that if you would like to go and upgrade in the sense of getting more firewalls, more switches, more of this, more of that? So do you have room for those kinds of things? There's a lot of things it could be, guys. We've got other things to consider like software upgrades. So this is a bit tricky if you don't use something like Microsoft Intune. I really sound like I'm promoting this product, but no, I'm not. That just happens to be what this course is about a lot. So using Microsoft Intune, you can go and check what versions your people are running. Remember those compliance scans we talked about. And if they're running a version that's too new or too old, yes, I said too new, you can have them upgraded automatically or you can have them downgraded automatically. All using Intune. Now, just in case you're wondering why you would want to go and downgrade something, let's say your company has a certain software which is allowed, but your company has a license for a specific version, which is maybe version 10 of this program. Let's just call it program X. So you're allowing people to use Program X, but you only have a license for version 10. Now, by now, you would have noticed if you go online or someone goes online to download a software, it automatically usually gives you the latest version of that software. Now, for the purpose of this demonstration, let's say the latest version is 11. Now, your company doesn't have a license for version 11. So using your compliance scans, you can go and pick up who's got a version that's too low or too high. If it's too high, which is the situation here, it'll downgrade them to version 10, which is the one you've got a license for. And then eventually, when your company obtains the right license or a newer license, you can have them upgraded again automatically to the newer version. Another factor to consider when it comes to upgrades is computer transfer to new users. So sometimes this could be a very easy upgrade. Sometimes you or one of the users would get an actual upgrade. Maybe you get a new laptop, a new desktop. Let's keep it simple. And even when that happens, what happens to the old machine? Has that machine been formatted? Has it been wiped? Was the hard drive removed? These are concerns because if that machine goes to a new person, which it probably would because we don't just throw stuff away unless it really is too old or too broken, generally gets repurposed to the newer stuff. And when that new person gets it, does that machine have stuff on it which it should not have? I'm not saying you have to go and format, but anything that's not for that person's eyes should probably be removed. Any access which you should not have access to, they should remove that on that machine. So make sure the person can only do what they're supposed to do and make sure they can only see what they're supposed to see. So I would have someone basically inspect the machine before you give it to someone new. Now let's move on to another phase here, factors to consider in the retirement phase. So if you or some of the users have devices, this could even be servers, mind you, that is now so old that you're planning on, getting rid of it. What is the procedure for your company or your client's company to get rid of old hardware, for example? It's usually going to come down to hardware. So some companies will just go and throw it on the dump site, which is not very good for the environment. Yes, you get companies that does that. Some companies will resell it, at a massively reduced price. This could be to the general public. It could be to the staff. I've seen normally if it gets resold, the average company would go and resell it at a massive discount. First option would go to the staff internally. And if nobody internally buys it or there's some stock left, then it'll get sold to the general public. You also get official companies that will come in and collect these old devices and physically destroy them or recycle them. This especially happens in institutions where, sensitive data is a real concern, like banks and stuff. They might be willing to go and, donate these machines to a school or something, but regulatory laws or rules or something or policies might not allow them to. So you'll find that normally a recycle company will come in and they will come and collect these old hard drives to these old machines, write down the serial numbers, destroy these machines by incinerating them or shredding them, and then they will issue this company with a certificate which can be put on file for the auditors. Where you guys will especially see this happening in companies is normally in server room, specifically with hard drives. Hard drive is the biggest pickle here. So what happens in server rooms is they almost all have RAID arrays, multiple hard drives, and these hard drives are clones of one another. And at some point, sooner or later, one of these hard drives is going to fail. It's going to make a beeping sound, light's going to turn red. You or some technician will go and take it out while the machines are on. That's called hot swappable. They'll take it out and they'll slide in a new blank hard drive and it's going to start cloning itself to that hard drive. That's called redundancy and high availability and all those fancy words. Now, what do we do with the old hard drive? One might argue and say, throw it in the trash. It's a broken hard drive. Yes, it's a broken hard drive, but if someone spent enough time on it and enough money on it, it can in fact be repaired. So maybe the data on the drive is worth millions, and to repair the drive might cost, let's say, 20K. So a new hard drive might cost a measly 2K or 5K, and a company's not going to go and spend money to go repair an old second-hand hard drive when they can just go buy a new one for much cheaper and just have the data replicate to it. But the opposition or the enemy, they might be willing to spend 20K to get this data worth millions because they don't have it to begin with. So that is why it is so important to dispose of these hard drives properly. Now, I could just go and destroy them myself. I can go and melt them down. I can go and drill holes for them, which is another way to go and do it. But when auditors come to audit the company, they're going to ask, where's the proof? Even though they know me, they're going to want to know where's the proof, which is why we use these proper recycling companies to come and collect these drives. They write down the serial numbers, they destroy them by incinerating them or shredding them, and they issue you with a certificate. Other factors to consider in the retirement phase is administrative processing. It's going to sometimes be a nightmare, guys. You've got things like packing and shipping. So this is old hardware, let's say old desktops and laptops. Someone is going to have to go and pack this into boxes or crates or something. And this is going to have to be packed properly because this stuff is sensitive. It can break. It's fragile. So someone's going to have to pack this properly, I might add. And somehow, someone is going to have to ship this to where it needs to go, unless you can get the people to come and collect. So all of these are real thorns in the side sometimes. And then lastly, guys, you've got the residual value that you need to go and consider. Other factors to consider in the new BYOD scenario. So BYOD, for the guys that don't remember, stands for bring your own device. That, in case you also don't know what that means, is when people use their own phone, laptop, desktop, tablet for the purposes of work. Now, usually you find the average Joe will just use their phone and tablet. Normally, the laptop or desktop is provided by the company in most cases. But whatever the situation might be, there is certain things you need to consider when it comes to the BYOD. The first would be device wipe considerations. So what is meant by that is if someone were to use their personal asset for company purposes, what happens when that person leaves the organization? They get fired, they get retrenched, they maybe resign. It can be a lot of things. The point is the person left the company. Now, the concern is the data on that person's device because he or she is obviously going to take it with them. It's their asset. But what about the data on there? Companies are often concerned that this person that's now left the organization might potentially still have sensitive information on the device. Now, one of the things you can go and do to resolve that issue is to do a wipe, a remote wipe to be more precise. Guess which tool can do that? Intune. Yeah, I bet you guys guessed that now. Intune can do a wipe. Now, unfortunately, to be able to do that, which is not actually mentioned by Microsoft in this course, I think it's probably because it sounds bad for business, that device needs to be turned on, guys. If it's not turned on, it's not going to work. That device needs to be on a network of sorts. If it's not on a hotspot of some kind, plugged into a cable, or on a mobile connection of some kind, how will it receive the instruction to remote wipe? So one of the reasons Microsoft says you can go and use a remote wipe is not just because people left the organization. It's in the event of the device getting lost or stolen. Now, if it's misplaced, that's one thing. You can give it the instruction to go and wipe, and it's probably going to get it. It's probably going to go and remote wipe itself. But if it's stolen, I don't think this is going to work because one of the first things people do when they steal your asset is they turn it off, and if it's got a SIM card in it, they remove the SIM card, and that means you cannot trace it in most cases, and you cannot give it the instruction to go and remote wipe. So I instead would recommend you guys go and use encryption. BitLocker encryption is a great method to get around this. So if you go and use encryption, no, you're not going to get your device back, but at least you know the data on that device is safe should it be misplaced or should the device be stolen. But it does not solve the problem if people resign or leave your company. So if you were to go and combine BitLocker with remote wipe, then you take care of both problems. So I would say use both of them, guys. Other things to consider with the BYOD is support for removing organizational applications and data. That can also be done by using, guess what? Intune. Well, guys, we have done it. We've finally gotten to the end of the first section. I don't think the other two sections are going to take that long. So the first section is probably going to be the longest, I hope. So the second main section of this module is called Explore Azure Active Directory. So we're going to be exploring the Azure Active Directory a little bit here, guys. So you can use the Azure Active Directory to do some of the following. Now this list I'm going to give you guys is pretty much all we're going to be discussing in this specific main section. But we will go and do a bit of a tour on the Azure portal just to show you guys what it's all about. So don't stress about that. That's probably going to be in the third main section if memory serves. So in this second main section, let's quickly get it behind us so we can go and jump onto the portal and get to the cool stuff. So you can use the Azure Active Directory to do things like configuring access to applications. That doesn't matter where these people are. Doesn't matter what devices they use. You can configure access to applications. Who can access applications, what privilege they must have, and what conditions they must meet before they can access applications. Really, really great. You yourself as the technician can do this from anywhere in the world, and they can also access these applications from anywhere in the world, depending, of course, on your conditions that you've specified. You can do other things like configuring SSO, single sign-on, for cloud-based software as a service applications. So instead of having each and every person type a username in the past for each and everything, each and every time, which is going to be a real thorn on the side, you can go and have these users type it in. They're still going to have to provide username and password to at least prove that they are who they say they are, but they will do it once. And once they've done that and they try and access these applications, it should for the most part automatically just go and give them access. But you need to do this correctly, because if it's done incorrectly, wrong people can have access to the wrong stuff. So it goes without saying you should go and test this. Never ever just go and deploy any setting or configuration or whatever without testing it first on a bunch of guinea pigs. Now, one of the more obvious things you can go and use the Azure Active Directory for is to manage users and groups. I mean, it says it there in the name, Azure Active Directory. The old traditional Active Directory on premises, the old school one of the main things we did on it was to go and create and manage and delete users and groups. And that still is the case with the Azure one. You can still do this in the cloud. You can also use the Azure Active Directory to go and provision users. So I accidentally gave that one away now just a minute ago, didn't I? So you can go and create these accounts and give them the settings that they need. You can go use the Azure Active Directory to enable federation between organizations if your company makes use of that. Not all companies use that, guys. You can go and use the Azure Active Directory to provide an identity management solution. So any Active Directory of sorts, whether we're talking about the cloud or the online one or whatever, these are called identity management solutions. A user account is normally referred to as an identity, in case you guys are wondering what the cheese we're talking about. So it's basically a user account management solution is what they're saying here. You can use the Azure Active Directory to identify irregular sign-in activity. So yes, you can use it to do that, but it's not the only tool or place you can use to do that. There's a lot of other things and a lot of other tools, a lot of monitoring tools you can go and make use of that does the same thing. It's basically going to go and check for anomalies, something out of the ordinary. So if someone is signing in and we know for a fact this person doesn't work for us anymore, or he or she is currently in the hospital, they're on leave, these are things that tend to stand out, and we call them red flags. And it's worth investigating those, because it could be, for all we know, that someone's account has gotten compromised, and this account that's now been compromised is basically a hacker, and he or she is actively working to, well, get up to no good. You can also use the Azure Active Directory to configure multi-factor authentication. It's one of my favorite things to go and do on there. And then lastly, folks, you can use the Azure Active Directory to extend existing on-premises Active Directory implementations to the Azure Active Directory. So that's what we've got on the list that's coming from Microsoft, which is in this course. But I can honestly tell you guys from experience what you can do in the Azure Active Directory. This list here is not even a drop in the bucket. This is nothing. So this is just a random bunch of things that Microsoft has listed for us that the Azure Active Directory can go and do. But I can tell you it's a lot more. So at least hopefully now you've got an idea. I think that's what they had in mind here, was just to give folks a more or less spitball idea of what Azure Active Directory is all about. Now, speaking of what Azure Active Directory is all about, here is the third and last main section, which is manage identities in the Azure Active Directory. So luckily for us, the second main section went way quicker, because the first one was quite a mouthful. But that's Microsoft view. Their stuff is very unbalanced. So what I would like to do in this section, which is basically what it's all about, is to basically just give you guys a tour of the Azure Active Directory. It's not a detailed tour. We're not going to go too deep, because the assumption is still there that you guys are brand stinking new to this. You might never have heard of Intune. You might never have even have heard of Microsoft Azure. So for me to just go and jump in and start doing stuff is really going to overwhelm you guys. And it's quite frankly not part of this module yet. So we're going to go nice and slow. We're going to ease into it first. And this section is just to give you guys a basic overview first of what the Azure Active Directory is, where what is, what you can more or less do. The basics of the basics. And then obviously in the next modules, we're going to go deeper, deeper, and deeper. So let's jump into it. I'm going to switch over to my browser in the background, which I actually already have open. It's It's been idling open in the background, this browser. And I'm already logged on to the Microsoft Azure portal. So let me switch over.
A few moments later.
All right, folks, here we are on the Microsoft Azure portal. So I'm saying the portal because it's, well, the only portal, quite frankly. There used to actually be more than one. You don't need to know that. But ages ago, I think around 2000, up until about 2018, there was two portals. There was the classic portal and there was the new portal. Now, the one we're seeing in front of us right now is the old portal, which was referred to as the new portal. Now, instead of calling it the new portal, we just call it the portal because it's the only portal. And yes, this is the old portal which referred to the new one, but even though it looks so much different that it's actually basically a whole new portal if you think about it. For a very long period of time, this portal had a black theme going for it, and now it's white. For the last couple of years, it's been white, but if you would like to change it black, you can still go and do that. So at the top here, there's a little sprocket icon, which is normally settings, and if you go in there, somewhere in here, you'll have the option to go and change it. For the last couple of months or so, as soon as you click there, you immediately have the option to go and change it. Now I see you have to go here and somewhere into the tabs. Now it looks very complicated, the Azure portal, but remember, looks can be deceiving, guys. Do not judge a book by its cover. Just because something looks complicated doesn't mean it is. You'll notice a lot of stuff on the Azure portal is very clearly labeled, and with a lot of stuff, if you hover your mouse cursor over it, it tells you what it is, what you need to go and put in, what you need to go and configure, and if you type in the wrong values, it'll tell you that it's wrong. It'll tell you why it is wrong. I love that. So that's perfect for learning, don't you think? Anyway, getting to the appearance, I want to see if it's not maybe under this tab. Yes, it is. So you can go and choose a theme, and let's go for a dark theme just to give you guys a bit of a feel for it. You see what that looks like. So if I go now back to a dashboard or something here, that looks really cool now, doesn't it? Gives it a nice, cool look and feel. Anyway, so let's not confuse folks that maybe jumps into some other random timestamp. So otherwise they're going to wonder, why is the portal black now when there is this white? So for the purposes of not confusing people, I'm going to try and revert back to the default here in case people are using timestamps and skipping certain things here in the course. So what we were talking about was specifically the Azure Active Directory. So here is the Azure portal, guys. I'm going to first go to the home page here. Shows you some basic services here that you can go and get quick access to. You can go and change that here. Alternatively, I like to just go here to the dashboard. And as you start creating services here on the Azure portal and start using them, those that you use most often will be reflected here, and you can actually go and click on them for quick access. I don't always do that, so what I normally do is I'll just go here to this menu. This is called the navigation menu. It used to be called the hub back in the day. Now, what we see in this menu is some of the most common things the average Joe like me and you would need. Now, this list is absolutely not everything you would find on the Azure portal. It's simply the most common things the average Joe would need. So I can go and drag them around. You can see I can drag them around like so. I can drag them around, can go and unpin the little buggers. Oops, I clicked on one of them by accident. Let me just go back there. My bad. So I can go drag them around, I can go and unpin them, I can do whatever. If you do not find what you're looking for in this specific list, you can go click here where it says all services. That actually used to be called more services and used to be at the bottom of this list. Microsoft is very rapidly changing stuff like crazy. They keep adding stuff, removing stuff, renaming stuff, and it's very difficult to keep track of all of this. So once you guys have done this course or any other course which is related to the cloud, it's very, very advisable to keep playing with whatever you've learned. So if the course you're doing is about Microsoft Azure, whatever you learned, you should keep practicing that because they change stuff rapidly. It doesn't help you do a cloud course now and you only start using that knowledge in 3 months from now. It's not going to help you one bit because by then so much would have changed, you're going to have to basically go and redo the course. It's really inconvenient, guys. Anyway, getting back to my topic. If you do not find what you're looking for in the navigation menu, you can click here on all services, or alternatively, you can go click on create a resource. So I can go here to all services, and you'll notice there's a long list on the left. These guys are just the categories of services you will get on Azure. Yes, that's just the categories. Now, if I were to click on one of these little categories, let's go to something simple like compute. You'll see this is a pretty decent list of services you get in that category. Now, would you believe me if I told you that what we see on this list is actually not everything in that category? So if you don't find what you're looking for in this category, which happens to me all the time with the courses I deliver, you will have to go resort to using that little search engine there. Alternatively, you can go run a search in this big search engine at the top, which is something I use a lot. That search engine at the top is one of the few things that's actually stayed the same, that stayed consistent over the years when Microsoft does all these changes. So whenever you need to find something new that you've never seen before, run a search for it. Or if Microsoft decides to move something around and now you don't know how to access that something, let's say it's virtual machines, you run a search for it. So there's virtual machines, but if I don't know where it is now, I can go here and I can go type in virtual machines. And you can see it's starting to give me suggestions on what it thinks I'm looking for. Ah, there we go. And I can click on that. And it's going to take me to that service without knowing where it was. Now, coincidentally, in this case, virtual machines actually happens to be in the navigation menu. Now, if you don't like that one where it says all services, you could also alternatively make use of this one that says create a resource, which used to be called new back in the day. Yeah, another one in Microsoft went and changed. So it's essentially the same thing in a nutshell. It's just a different way of presenting it to you. So you still have your categories. There's compute if I want to go and click on compute. Now it's got nice little tiles. Once again, if you don't find what you're looking for here, you can go run a search for it. And yeah, guys, that's how you find it. Now, the actual topic here was not just the Azure portal. It was more specifically the Azure Active Directory. One way you guys can go and access it is to go here. And here in the navigation pane, you'll find there it says Azure Active Directory. That is an example of platform as a service, which is a subcategory of public cloud for the folks that know public cloud. If I click on that, there we go. It currently says default directory. So when you go and make yourself a brand spanking new Azure subscription, all that, it's going to say default directory. That's the default, ironically, pun intended. Default. The default is default directory. Wow, that's a lot of default in the words, isn't it? Now, obviously, if you've got your own company, you probably have a proper name and a proper domain and all that. You can go and link that. You can go and create your own aliases and stuff. We're not going to focus on that right now. That's not what this course is about. So for now, I'm just going to use the default directory. So in your company's directory, in this menu, you might think this is a navigation menu, but no, it's not. That, folks, is the navigation menu. When I click here at the top left, this menu is referred to as a blade. So whenever you go into a component on the cloud, on the Azure portal, in this case I'm on Azure Active Directory, that menu is called a blade, not a navigation menu. And depending on which one of these tiles you click on, these options, it could potentially open another list of options. In other words, another blade, and another blade, and another blade. So you can think of this as going into a folder on your machine, and then that folder has a couple of subfolders, and that folder has a couple of subfolders, and subfolders, and subfolders. And before you know it, you're 20 folders deep. So this could be the same situation. Most of the time, you just go one blade, maybe two blades deep. But there has been times where I'll go 5, 6, 7 blades deep. It happens, guys, depending on what you want to configure and what you're busy doing. Now, looking at this blade here, one of the options you guys are going to be working with the most is users and groups. This actually used to be one tab. It used to be called users and groups. Not that you need to know that. Now it's users, now it's groups. So if you would like to see your users that currently exist, or you would like to create new ones, delete old ones, change permissions for them, change passwords for them, anything in that regard, that'll be there. There's your groups where you can go and create new ones, delete old ones, change things about them. So I'm going to go here to users just to give you guys a bit of an overview, just so you can get a feel for it. And there we go. So at the moment I only have one user. It's a completely fake one I made up. That name doesn't exist. It's completely fake in case you guys are wondering. So the first and only account you guys are going to see in the beginning is your main account that you basically get with your subscription, with your tenant, if you will. And this main account is a global administrator. That's the highest privilege you can pretty much get on the Azure portal, as well as the Microsoft 365 environment, if you guys happen to use the 365 environment. So all of this stuff ties into one another and it all links to one another. Now, if you would like to make a new user, there's many ways you can go about it. I mean, you can go and synchronize your on-premises Active Directory with this Active Directory cloud, which we refer to as a hybrid Active Directory. So that is one way you can get your user accounts on here. Another way would be to go and make them. For example, I can go and make them one by one. So I can click here on New User. I can go and actually manually make it, or I can invite someone outside the company using their live ID. This is great for consultants, contract workers, that kinds of stuff. We want to give someone an account, but you don't want to give them a full-fledged account on your Active Directory environment. This account is normally going to be temporary for something like a contractor or consultant, and once the job is done or whatever this collaboration was, you basically just get rid of the account. Anyway, so let's go on this one, creating a new user. You can see I can also go and choose create a user or invite a user. You type the person's name, so I'm just going to go and type in, I don't know, let's type Jenny. And yeah, username wise, you can go decide how you want to go and do this. Some people will go and use the person's first name, some people will use the person's last name, although I wouldn't recommend either of those, especially in bigger companies, because the chances are there already is a person of that first name or that last name. So you normally want to go and use a combination of the person's first name and last name. Heck, it could even be their full first name and last name. I have seen cases where the company would use the employee's employee number, although I don't recommend that because that confuses the user. So if this person is called Smith, their last name is Smith, I can go make a Jenny S, the S being for Smith. Or I can go make a J Smith, the J being for Jenny. Or I can just go and type in Jenny Smith. So this is what he or she will have to type in when I try and log on to anything. Here I just type in the person's name. Display name, in other words. So display name, first name, last name. It's up to you where you want to go and complete that. Did anyone notice these green ticks? So it doesn't matter what you're busy with on the Azure portal. In this case, I'm on the Azure Active Directory. Whenever you type in some sort of value into something, it'll either give you a green tick or a red exclamation mark. Green tick means the value is accepted. If it's exclamation mark, it means whatever you typed into that block is not accepted, and you can generally go and hover your mouse cursor over the exclamation mark, and it'll tell you it's incorrect and why it's incorrect and what you normally need to more or less type in there. So it's basically guiding you, which is awesome. And when you scroll down here, you have the ability to go and do the password side of things. I can either go and have it automatically generated, or you can go and manually choose one for the user. Now, I just prefer to go and normally generate it myself, because whether you choose it or whether they go and generate it for you, either way, this is a temporary password, guys. As soon as this person, who's now called Jenny, as soon as Jenny logs on for the first time, it's going to prompt Jenny to type in their password, this one here, whatever this password might be. And immediately after they provide it the first time, it's going to prompt them to choose a new, more permanent password, which they're going to have to type in twice just to confirm. So with that in mind, I would say, you know what, just let it generate. It's normally going to be 8 characters long, 4 letters, 4 numbers. The first letter is going to be in uppercase. At least that's what it normally is. I'm not saying that is what it is. So if I click on that, yep, that seems to be the case. 4 letters, 4 numbers, first letter being uppercase. So that's randomly generated. So here you can go and add the person to a group if you have any at this point in time. I've got absolutely none. This is a completely brand spanking new Azure environment. I'm using an Azure trial, a 50-day trial right now. So for the most part, I've got enough permissions to show you guys what I want to show you guys with this trial subscription of mine, which explains the random email address at the top. So that's a fake email I made for the purpose of this demonstration. So don't bother mailing me on that. You're not going to get a hold of me on that. Instead, if you guys want to get a hold of me, join my Discord server or just ask me in the chat how you can get a hold of me if you would like to get a hold of me. Anyway, getting back to the topic. So if you've got any existing groups at this point, you can go and add them, or you can add them later to these groups. It's your choice. Here you can see what privilege the user has. By default, the user is called a user, which means the person has got 0 privilege. He or she cannot do nada. They cannot do anything. So if you'd like this person to be able to do certain tasks, maybe he or she is an IT administrator of some kind, you can click there. And here you'll be presented with a very long list of roles. You'll notice these are not round radio buttons. These are square check boxes, tick boxes, which means you can give someone more than one role if needed. Watch out. That's a question in the exam, guys. So whenever I see something that I know is in the exam, I will point it out. That's a question in the exam where they ask you, can a user have more than one role assigned to them? Yes, they can. Check that out. I can go and tick multiple roles if need be. Watch out for that, guys. Anyway, so back about, I think, 2018 or so, there used to be 3 radio buttons. One used to say user, which is that one. One used to say global administrator, which is the highest rank you can pretty much go. And the third one said limited administrator. So if you chose that, the person will be an administrator, but he or she will have limited privileges. And strangely enough, as soon as you clicked on limited administrator, it will pop up with an additional menu which had about 5 or 6 extra options to go and choose from, which were limited roles. Now, global administrator, user, and everything else has been thrown into one consolidated list here, and you can see it's absolutely not just 5 or 6 anymore. Microsoft has really come a long way. I mean, look at how many roles there is. It's insane. So if I wanted to make this person an administrator, you can go and choose that. So there is the main cheese if I wanted to go and do that. Not going to do that today. Scrolling down, you can go and fill in the stuff if you need to. And once you click on create, it only takes about 1 or 2 seconds to create the person. Same can be said about a group. Now please note, not everything on the Azure portal is going to create in just 1 or 2 seconds. There are certain things that sometimes takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, heck, 30 minutes. I've created things that take up to an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, depending on what you do. So a lot of this stuff still needs to actually be created. Yes, it's in the cloud, which means it's somewhere else, but it still exists and it still needs to be created on that someone else's property. And that could take time, guys. So if you're going to go and make a virtual machine and you've chosen all the specs for this virtual machine, I'm just using a virtual machine as an example. Once you click on create, that could take up to 5 or 10 minutes because it still needs to actually create the virtual machine, install the operating system for you, and all that nonsense. So just keep that in mind if something is delayed a little bit. And whenever you create something, delete something, change something, or do whatever on the Azure portal, you'll find this little bell there. That's the notification section. It shows you what the progress currently is. So in my case, it was instantaneous. It just says it's done. And depending on what resource this is, it'll give you a little link there that you can go click on. It will take you straight to that component. You don't have to click on that. You can always use the longer method. So it'll take you to that component. If something is still being created, deployed, configured, deleted, whatever the case might be, you can normally see a little time period or timer here which shows you how long it's been taking, and sometimes it even show you how long it might still take, which is pretty convenient, guys. Alright, so here we don't see Jenny just yet, so I might have to refresh the page. So I'm just going to go click on something random on the left, and then go back to Azure Active Directory. Let's go to users again, and then there's Jenny. You can see there's Jenny now. Jenny is just a user, and if I were to click on Jenny here now, it's going to open a blade specifically for Jenny. So that's a blade, a very short blade, but it's specific to Jenny. Anything and everything we see here is unique and specific to the user, called Jenny in this case. So I can go and assign roles if I have not yet, and we have not yet. You remember we left this person on user. I can change roles, remove roles, I can delete the user, I can reset their password. Please bear in mind, for some reason, when you reset someone's password, it's not instantaneously like on premise. If you reset a person's password here, it sometimes takes 5 to 10 minutes. So if you do that, I would say tell the person to go make a cup of coffee. By the time they get back, it should be up and running. You'll see here you can go do a whole lot of other things. You can go and add the person to groups afterwards, remove them from groups, change groups. The amount of stuff you guys can go and do is just insane. Well, folks, that's pretty much all you need to know for today for Module 1. The rest of the stuff will go into in a lot more depth in the next modules. So please stay tuned for that. So I would just like to thank you guys for watching this module. Thank you for supporting my channel. And please stay tuned for Module 2. So if you've enjoyed this video, if you feel like you've learned something, please do me a favor and give the video a like. It really does help the channel and the video, like I said at the beginning of the video. And obviously, if you would like to know when Module 2 comes out, if you have not watched it already, please subscribe. Otherwise, you're going to miss it. Lastly, before you folks disappear on me, I just want to give a special shout out to the sponsors of this channel. I've got a couple of sponsors, Patreon, PayPal, and otherwise. So here they are. Special thank you to the Patreon sponsors and PayPal sponsors. If you guys would also like to sponsor the channel, you're welcome to do so. You can find that information in the video description down below. Alternatively, you can just click on the thanks button below the video. Now, should you go to the Patreon, there you will find 3 tiers, at least on the date when this video was made, there was 3 tiers. The first tier is literally just to support the channel, where you will have your name displayed at the end of each new video that's released, as long as you're a Patreon. And then the second tier and the third tier will obviously have a little bit more benefits available to you. Feel free to go and check that out. The link is in the video description down below. All right, folks, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you for supporting the channel. I will see you all on Module 2 of the Microsoft MD 101.